All right, Inside New. This is symbolic part two of a response to your video called "Is This Islamophobia?" I ran out. I couldn't do it in 10 minutes, man. Okay, so you have a major statement of opinion that I think you mentioned twice in your video. That is, it is my opinion that freedom of religion must end when that religion becomes harmful to those around it or even its own practitioners, whether they be willing or not. Yeah, I gotta say, I greatly disagree with this. This is kind of like taking anti-smoking laws and expanding it to the universal. Um, um, you know, uh, there's so much. Well, the word harmful is actually can be a very subjective word. I mean, let's take for instance people being overweight. Now this is considered maybe not harmful to others. Uh, However, it's considered harmful to the individual. So, do we pass laws that say, okay, this is a harmful practice to you, and for your own safety, you cannot be overweight. So, what are we going to do? We're going to fine you for the number of pounds you are overweight. Are we going to enforce a exercise regimen on you? Are we going to imprison you and regulate your diet until you lose weight? Now you see that the possibility for tyranny and the violation of individual rights comes in. Now people will argue, well, all these additional medical expenses that are associated with being overweight, diabetes, that these costs will put a economic pressure upon society, and that's not fair, and that damages society. But that's just the cost of society has to bear for honoring individual freedoms. The possibility for tyranny here is really great. I would say that religious freedoms end when they begin to infringe upon the rights of others. That's where they're become not that they end, but they taper off, and you get this dynamic state, where my freedom ends where I start to infringe upon the freedom of another. That's sort of how that goes. Otherwise, we end up, as I say, risking tyranny. Um, uh, and as I say, what is harm? You know. Um, so the question of sanctions, and so, well, one, I don't believe we should limit immigration based on religion. I mean, we have to honor individual rights, and someone can be of a particular religion, and we can't say, well, we're not going to let you immigrate here, and accept you into our society because of your religion. I mean, that that is, what do we do then? We could do that. Well, pick your religion. So I really don't think we can do that. As far as sanctions with other countries go, I mean, I think we have to honor, on principle, each individual country. I mean, if they end up, unfortunately, with a sort of an oppressive regime, I mean, it's the responsibility of that society to deal with it. If, however, that society is putting political pressure and tampering with another society in order to create, regime change, I suppose you'd say, and impose their own system on another country, I think we can, we may be warranted or justified politically in opposing that if we believe that that is an unjust system that someone is trying to impose. This gets down to classic politics. However, all these things have to be done with care. And many of the political things we do turn out to be based on economics. I mean, there are quote unquote economic interests at stake, and everybody raises all these flags of justice and freedom, etc. And what's really going on is economic interests. I read Thucydides, his work on the Peloponnesian War. The war between Athens and Sparta that went on for something like 30 years. The most remarkable thing about it is if you read the speeches that were made in the Senate in Athens, you could lift those speeches right out of that book from 2,400 years ago and put them in the Congress of today. And you wouldn't notice. Make a few tiny little changes, and it's basically the same speech. We're going to spread freedom. We're going to spread democracy. We must free these people from the oppression of the Spartans. What was really at stake is, there were economic interests at stake. Uh, areas in Sicily, areas under Spartan control in society, had a certain amount of wealth that the Athenians thought they wanted, and they had their demagogues too, people who would stir the people up when there was almost a peace treaty or almost a decision not to go to war. Demagogues would arise and stir the people up, and next thing you know, there was a war. It turned out to be ruinous. Athens ultimately lost that war. Sparta won. Um, so there are a lot of lessons to be gleaned from history, but uh, people raise these banners under which they promote interference with other nations and war and conquest, and what's really at stake is, you know, there's some material gain at stake. So one has to be very careful of that too. I really think our tampering with other countries should be absolutely minimal. You know, this is simplistic. What I'm saying is, politics is a very complex area. Um, so I think that I may have really covered everything now in a little more than 10 minutes. Uh, Let me just see here if I have any other kind of curious things to add in here. Um, oh, I had a few just notes on the sources of our law coming from Roman law, canon law, um, um, British common law, and of course constitutional law. Very interesting evolution, how it all ties together. Um, um, Also, in terms of the use of the word barbarism, you wonder in about 300, 500 years, which of our practices will our uh, descendants consider barbaric. It can be very relative in terms of time. Um, Again, just the idea of societal cohesion. That a lot of laws exist for societal cohesion. I don't know if I mentioned in my last video some of the things involved. One of the inclusions in the evidence code is very interesting. When it talks about evidence uh, and whether spouses should be forced to testify against one another, uh, it's considered that there is a benefit to society if you can force husbands and wives to testify against one another. But as you know, there is an evidential privilege that married couples have, spouses have, that states that they cannot be forced to testify against one another. And the reason for this is it is considered a higher good. The cohesion of the family is considered a higher good because it promotes the stability of society. The stability of the family promotes the stability of society. So for that reason, there is a privilege, evidential privilege, and spouses cannot be forced to testify against one another. So we always have this idea of societal cohesion and higher goods and the good of society involved in law, as well as individual rights. Um, oh, and then we come down to economic interests once again. Would we really worry so much about what's happening in the Islamic world if there weren't so many oil deposits there? You know, uh, that's I think. Oh, I could make comments about your talk about the victim card and the race card. I think that this idea of the card is a media or right-wing invention. We're not playing a game, and there are no real cards involved as far as I'm concerned. But that's a whole other topic, and I don't have time because the second 10 minutes is running out. Thank you for your attention. Fascinating video. And I can only scratch the surface on this thing. I would sum up at this point, but I don't think I'm really going to have time to sum up. I don't think there should be limitations on immigration. I think that if you're going to use economic sanctions, it's a very serious thing. The idea there is that you basically economically damage a country to cause internal strife, I believe. So that has to be used very, very judiciously. And I don't think against the country for its own internal practices, only if that country is putting political pressure on another country in order to tamper with that other country. Even then, it has to be considered very carefully. We shouldn't be pushing our own culture on others. That's just unjust. Yes, unjust, I would say. Okay, bye bye.